March 31st, 2006, a spring break Friday evening in Columbus, Ohio. For one young man, the night would begin like so many others and end in a mystery that still haunts more than a decade later. Meet Brian Randall Shaffer, 27 years old, medical student at Ohio State University College of Medicine, a young man with promise, with plans, and then he vanished. This is the story of Brian Shaffer, what we know, what remains unanswered, and what different paths the investigation followed. Stay with us. Before we go into the disappearance, we need to understand the man at the center of it. Brian Randall Shaffer, 27 years old, tall, athletic, kind, a medical student who seemed carved straight from the mold of the classic overachiever. Yet the closer you look, the more you sense a quiet complexity beneath that bright surface. Brian grew up in Pickerington, Ohio, a safe place, a predictable place, the kind of town where people notice when something changes. Friends remember a kid who was easy to be around, sharp mind, dry humor, the type who could switch from cracking a joke to discussing medical research without missing a beat. But life had shifted in a heavy way only weeks before he vanished. His mother, Renee, passed away after a long struggle with myelodysplasia. She had been his emotional anchor. Her loss cut deep. Those close to him said he hid the hurt well, but it was there. You could see it in the long silences, in the way he drifted when conversations went soft. Now picture a man balancing two worlds. On one side, the pressure of medical school. Endless hours, long nights, the constant weight of exams that define your future. On the other side, grief that has not found a place to settle yet. Even then, hope still surrounded his life. He had a girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner, who believed they were building a future together. They had a trip to Florida planned for spring break. Brian had talked about the ocean, the warm air, the chance to finally breathe after weeks of nonstop study. You can imagine the contrast, a bright future, a heavy loss, two paths pulling in different directions. Behind all of this was a young man who seemed to be handling it. He stayed social. He kept up with friends. He went out when he could. He worked hard at school. But grief changes people in ways most never see. As you learn his story, you begin to feel that something was stirring in Brian's world. Something private, something unresolved. You cannot help but wonder if it had anything to do with the night he disappeared. Because the truth is this, Brian was not the type of person who simply walked into the dark and vanished. Yet that is exactly what the world watched happen. March 31st, 2006, the start of spring break for students at Ohio State. The kind of night where people unwind, the kind where the air feels lighter, even in the middle of a crowded city. But inside that feeling was another current, something subtle, something you sense only in hindsight. Brian met his father, Randy, for dinner that evening, a simple meal, a quiet conversation. Randy said his son looked tired, not irritated or withdrawn, just worn from long study sessions, nothing unusual. Yet when people look back, they search that moment for clues. They turn every detail over, wondering if something unspoken lingered under the surface. After dinner, Brian met up with his friend and roommate, Clint Florence. They planned to have a few drinks and celebrate the start of break. A normal choice, a relieving one. They headed toward the South Campus Gateway, where the Ugly Tuna Saloona sat above street level. Security cameras caught the two men riding the escalator up toward the bar at around 9 p.m. They look relaxed. Brian even manages a faint smile. It is one of the last clear images we have of him moving with certainty. Over the next couple of hours, they drifted from bar to bar. They visited spots in the arena district, had a few drinks, talked with strangers, moved with the tide of the Friday night crowd. Nothing strange, nothing risky, just the rhythm of young adults letting loose in Columbus. They eventually returned to the Ugly Tuna shortly after 1 a.m. This time they were joined by a friend of Florence, Meredith Reed, who offered them a ride back. Once again, the camera shows Brian stepping off the escalator and walking inside. The bar was alive, music vibrating through the floor, voices blending into a steady roar, neon highlights casting soft color across faces and glasses. And somewhere in that noise, Brian drifted. He moved freely. He talked with people. He stepped outside the main entrance. At about 1:55 a.m., he appears on camera again, this time standing near the entrance, speaking casually with two women. His body language is calm, no sign of distress, no sign of fear. When the conversation ends, Brian turns and walks back inside the bar. That moment matters. It is the last time anyone can confirm seeing him. Inside, the scene remained loud and crowded. Brian's friends stayed near the bar area. They thought he was nearby, maybe grabbing a last drink, maybe talking to someone. Nothing stood out. Closing time arrived. The lights brightened. People shuffled out. Voices lowered as the night came to its natural end. Meredith and Clint scanned the room, expecting to spot Brian. They called his phone. They looked through the thinning crowd. He was gone. They assumed he slipped out ahead of them. Maybe he left to get food or walked home early. Nothing about the moment suggested danger, but the camera footage would tell a different story. The arrival was captured. The moment outside was captured. Yet no camera ever saw Brian leave. Not through the escalator entrance, not through any monitored public exit. He walked back into the bar, and from that point on, Brian Shaffer simply vanished from view. Morning arrived with the calm that follows every weekend night in a college town. The sun rose, cars moved, students slept in, and somewhere in that quiet, the first faint alarm began to ring. When Brian did not answer calls the next morning, none of his friends panicked. After a long night out, silence felt normal. People sleep in, phones die, plans shift. No one imagined the silence would stretch far longer than a few hours. But that silence grew heavier when he missed the small things. Messages from his girlfriend, Alexis, a check-in with his brother, then the bigger thing. The trip. Brian and Alexis were scheduled to fly to Miami early on April 3rd. A trip they had both looked forward to, a break from school, a chance to breathe after the long months of stress and grief. Alexis waited at the airport. She called him again and again. No answer. Brian never showed up. Concern turned into confusion. Confusion turned into fear. His father, Randy, tried to stay calm, but he knew something was wrong. He drove to Brian's apartment. The car was there, parked neatly, no signs of disturbance. The bed looked untouched. Clothes were still arranged, books still stacked, everything exactly as it should be, which meant something was very wrong. On April 2nd, 2006, just one day after Brian vanished, his family filed a missing persons report with the Columbus Division of Police. Investigators moved quickly. They began where he was last seen, the Ugly Tuna Saloona, the bar that had captured him on camera entering, captured him outside talking, captured him walking back inside, then told the world nothing more. Detectives combed through every frame of footage from that night. They watched people walk in and out of the bar in slow motion. They froze frames, they rewound, they studied faces, they tracked clothing, they watched the escalator, the main exit, the public hallways, and the same unsettling truth appeared again and again. Brian never walked out. His friends were interviewed. Dozens of patrons from that night were contacted. Staff members were questioned about what they saw near closing time. By the end of the first wave of investigation, more than 100 people had been interviewed. Every story stacked neatly on a table of facts, and none of them moved the case forward. The police searched the perimeter of the bar, then the building itself, then the surrounding blocks. The South Campus Gateway was still under development in 2006. Parts of it were active construction zones. There were areas the public typically did not use. Service corridors, maintenance doors, dim hallways behind locked sections. Detective teams walked through each of them. Flashlights sweeping old drywall, exposed wiring, unfinished floors. Nothing. No signs of struggle, no personal belongings, not even a misplaced footprint. As the hours continued to pass without any trace of Brian, something else began to emerge. A feeling shared by the investigators, Brian's family, and anyone who followed the early hours of the case. This was not going to be a simple missing persons report. It was becoming something stranger. A disappearance that made no logical sense. A man who walked into a bar, visible from multiple angles, surrounded by cameras, and then vanished somewhere between the warm glow of neon lights and the sharp edge of closing time. The first alarms had become the first real fear. Brian Shaffer was missing, and the trail, from the very first day, already felt unnervingly cold. When a disappearance begins with confusion and ends with silence, theories fill the space in between. In Brian's case, that space widened fast. Investigators had no sightings, no digital trail, no financial activity, no evidence of injury or conflict inside the bar. All they had were timelines, camera footage, and the growing sense that something had gone very wrong. As the days passed, three main theories began to shape the investigation. First theory, foul play. Some believed Brian met someone inside the Ugly Tuna who meant him harm. The idea seemed unlikely at first glance. The bar was crowded, cameras were everywhere, but detectives knew danger does not always look dramatic. It can be quiet, subtle, hidden in a back hallway or a brief moment out of view. The key question was simple. If someone harmed Brian, how did they get him out without a single camera catching them? That question pulled investigators toward the service door behind the bar. A plain door, no cameras, leading into a construction zone that wound through half-finished hallways and dim, cluttered storage spaces. It was the only known exit not covered by surveillance. The idea was chilling, a location with blind spots, a moment when the crowd thinned, a person with intent. Nothing inside the bar proved it. No signs of a struggle, no witnesses speaking of a confrontation. Yet the camera footage created a maddening contradiction. Brian walked in. He never walked out. If foul play happened, it happened in the one direction the cameras could not see. Second theory, voluntary disappearance. Some wondered if Brian left on his own. The grief of losing his mother was still fresh. School pressure was relentless. People looked back at his last weeks and searched for clues of emotional strain. Could he have chosen to step away? The idea raised more questions than answers. If Brian wanted to disappear, why leave without his car, his wallet, or money? Why not contact the girlfriend he cared about so deeply? Why miss a trip he had been excited about? Police followed this theory anyway. They checked homeless shelters, hospitals, transportation hubs. No one matching Brian's description ever surfaced. And the service door again became the sticking point. If he left voluntarily, why choose the most difficult exit in the building? Third theory, accident. Some investigators considered the possibility that Brian left through a back area of the bar and became injured in a construction zone. A fall, a hidden corner, a place where someone could lie unnoticed. It seemed far-fetched, but the unknown often forces impossible possibilities onto the table. Teams searched every accessible part of the Gateway construction area. They found nothing. The nearby Olentangy River added another layer of speculation. If Brian wandered away from the bar in an altered state, could he have slipped toward the river? The thought tormented his father, Randy, who searched the banks himself, sometimes late into the night. But a body never appeared. Weeks turned into months. Theories multiplied. Some whispered about the so-called smiley face killer theory, though investigators found no meaningful connection. Others speculated about strangers in the bar, quiet interactions, tiny moments missed by the cameras. Some even suggested Brian was alive somewhere, living a new identity, though no real evidence ever pointed in that direction. Every idea carried a fragment of logic. Every idea fell apart under scrutiny. The truth remained locked between two undeniable facts. Fact 1. Brian Shaffer entered the Ugly Tuna Saloona shortly after 1 a.m. Fact 2. No one can prove how he left. Everything between those moments is a void. And that void swallowed more than the investigation. It swallowed certainty. It swallowed hope. It swallowed any clean explanation of what happened inside that bar during the final minutes before closing time. As detectives dug deeper into Brian's disappearance, they realized they were dealing with a case shaped by obstacles. Some were straightforward, others were subtle. Together they formed a maze that made the truth harder to reach. The first and most frustrating obstacle was the surveillance footage. At first glance, the system inside the bar looked thorough. Multiple angles, constant recording, the kind of coverage that should catch every movement. But once investigators broke the timeline down frame by frame, the illusion faded. They watched Brian ride the escalator up to the Ugly Tuna earlier in the night. Crisp image, full view, no mystery. They watched him step outside around 1:55 a.m. to talk with two women. Clear footage, nothing strange. Then they watched him walk back inside the bar. The door closes behind him. The image freezes. After that moment, he never appears again. Investigators studied every second of the hours after. They checked the escalator camera. They checked the hall cameras. They checked the entrance camera that monitored everyone who came and went. Nothing. They were confident Brian did not leave through the main exit. The camera angle covered it fully. No blind spot, no error. One officer would later say they were 100% certain he did not walk out through that door. That left the building's other exits, the ones most patrons never used. Behind the Ugly Tuna was a service door, plain metal, easily overlooked, not built to welcome customers. That door led into a construction zone filled with dark corners, half-built walls, storage clutter, and uneven flooring. In 2006, the South Campus Gateway was still being shaped, and that area was a maze of hazards. If Brian left through that door, he entered a place where nearly anything could have happened unnoticed. The thought pushed investigators deeper into the unknown. They returned to the construction zone again and again. They walked slowly through every corridor. They photographed debris piles. They checked spaces behind stacked wood, under temporary platforms, inside utility rooms. They found nothing. No fabric from clothing, no sign of a fall, no trace of blood, not even a scuff mark that could be tied to him. Their next lead was digital. Brian's phone records, calls, pings, any sign that the device had been used. For 2 years, nothing happened. Then something strange surfaced. In 2008, one of Brian's family members called his phone and heard it ring. Not a straight-to-voicemail disconnect. A ring, a sound that suggested the phone might still be active. A ping from the cell tower in Hilliard was recorded, about 14 miles northwest of Columbus. Hope surged. But the phone company later explained the ring was likely a network glitch, a ghost signal. The kind that can happen even when a phone is dead or destroyed. The theory collapsed as fast as it appeared. Over the years, tips trickled in. People reported men who looked like Brian in cities across the country. Police followed up on each sighting. Nothing ever matched. In 2020, a photo surfaced of a homeless man in Tijuana who resembled Brian. The image spread online fast. Some said the similarity was uncanny. The FBI investigated. They concluded the man was not Brian. The weight of uncertainty bore down on the Shaffer family. Randy, Brian's father, searched riverbanks on his own time. He spoke with detectives. He pushed for answers. He waited by the phone. He waited for something, anything. In 2013, Randy died in a tragic accident when a falling tree struck him. The community mourned him. His death added another layer of heartbreak to a family already carrying more than most could bear. Yet something meaningful came from his persistence. His advocacy helped shape improved missing persons protocols across Ohio. His push for better coordination meant future families would not feel as lost as he did in those early days. In 2021, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation released an age progression image to show how Brian might look today. A reminder that time moves forward even when answers do not. Through all of this, one truth has remained constant. Every part of the investigation, from footage analysis to construction searches to international tips, leads to the same dead end. Brian is gone, and there is still no trace of what happened after he stepped back inside the bar. Nearly 2 decades have passed since Brian Shaffer walked into that bar. Time has softened some details, but it has sharpened the mystery. His case stands out for one reason. Not because he vanished. People go missing every year. But because he vanished inside a building filled with cameras in a busy entertainment district at closing time with friends nearby. That should not be possible. And yet, here we are. Investigators still revisit the footage from the Ugly Tuna. They still look at the timeline. They still ask the same questions. Where did Brian go? Who saw what? Which moment holds the real clue? New detectives have joined the case over the years. Each one brings fresh eyes, new training, and sharper tools. They all walk away with the same reaction: confusion. They talk about the feeling the bar gives them, the strange sense that something in the timeline does not line up. Some describe it as a puzzle missing a central piece. Others say the footage feels like a trick played by reality, too complete to be fooled, but incomplete in the one place that matters most. The construction zone behind the bar remains the center of speculation. People still wonder if something happened there. A fall, an encounter, a hidden space long since sealed or renovated, but there is no evidence for any of it. Others point to human behavior. They look at how grief can weigh on a person, how exhaustion can cloud judgment, how a night meant for relaxation can spiral quietly into danger. The human mind is complex. People hide their struggles even from those they love. But again, nothing in Brian's life pointed to a plan to disappear. He had a beach trip coming up with Alexis. He had career goals. He had friends who cared about him. His father believed to his last day that Brian wanted a full and bright future. Theories swirl because the silence is hard to accept. Some imagine a chance encounter gone wrong in the bar. Others believe he slipped away unseen through a rare exit. Some think a tragic accident happened far from where anyone was looking. A few still cling to the idea that Brian walked away from everything and chose a different life. None of these ideas can be proven. What remains is the part that haunts everyone who touches this case. A man does not simply vanish without leaving a trail. Something happened between the moment Brian stepped into the bar and the moment the lights turned on for closing. Something that erased every trace of him. His loved ones still hold on to hope. They imagine a future where someone recognizes a face in a crowd, or where a memory sparks in the right mind at the right moment. They hope for a break in the case, even a small one. Something that finally gives them the clarity they have searched for since that spring night. Police still accept tips. They still review information. They still answer calls from people who remember something they saw, no matter how small. Each tip is treated as if it could be the one that changes everything. But for now, the mystery stands untouched. Brian Shaffer, last seen on April 1st, 2006, entered the Ugly Tuna Saloona, never seen leaving it. The case remains open, the questions remain unanswered, and the story continues to echo through Columbus, Ohio, like a quiet warning about how fast a moment can shift from ordinary to unexplainable. When you look at Brian Shaffer's story, it stays with you long after the facts fade. There is something about the silence, something about the way a normal night can shift into a question that lasts for years. Brian walked into the Ugly Tuna with friends. He laughed. He talked about the trip he was taking. He stood on a busy balcony surrounded by people living their ordinary lives. Then he stepped through a doorway, and the world lost track of him. His story is not just about a disappearance. It is about the space left behind, the phone calls that never came, the birthdays missed, the empty chair at family gatherings, the ache his father carried until the day he passed, a family waiting for answers that never arrived. It is about a mystery that does not just remain unsolved, but untouched. A case where every lead ends in a circle and every theory falls apart at its center. The footage still shows Brian walking into the bar, a moment frozen in time, a moment investigators have watched thousands of times, hoping the truth would reveal itself, but it never has. So his story stays with us, because there is no ending, and maybe that is why it matters. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with this story. What do you think happened that night inside the Ugly Tuna Saloona? Did Brian leave through the construction zone unseen? Was there someone he encountered inside the bar? Or is this a case where the truth has been hiding in plain sight all along? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Next time, we'll explore another case, one that echoes the same haunting questions, where truth hides in plain sight and time refuses to let go. If you want to see it first, make sure to subscribe and join me again for another story that refuses to be forgotten. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, some mysteries never fade.